Dan Tehan, thanks so much for your time. You've had a number of questions over schools and we're going to continue that theme today. But if I could start with New South Wales. New South Wales says it hasn't found any evidence that there has been transmission of the coronavirus from any students to teachers. Can we expect that that is probably the case nationwide?
Well, that's what the medical experts have been advising governments across the nation since this pandemic started. They've been consistent in their advice to both the federal government and state and territory governments that it is safe for schools to be open, that it's safe for students to be going to school, and that it's safe for teachers to be teaching at school with the right protocols put in place, making sure that those teachers who are over 65 aren't teaching in the classroom and those teachers with a comorbidity aren't. But that has been the consistent advice right throughout this pandemic, and we continue to ask those medical experts to look at the research, to look at the information that's coming from overseas. And obviously we saw that important piece of research which was done by New South Wales Department of Health and Education on the weekend, which once again showed by tracking those students and teachers who had COVID-19, tracking what type of transmission there'd been from those teachers and students, and obviously it was incredibly limited and backed the medical panel's advice that it is safe for schools to be open.
Have you got a problem with states moving to classroom learning at different stages?
Well, ultimately that will be a decision for states and territories because they have the jurisdictional responsibility when it comes to schools. But what we would like to see is all states and territories aim to be back to full classroom teaching for all year levels by the end of May. We think that that would be a wonderful goal for us to set as a nation, and if we could have all children back at school by the end of May, that would be a great achievement, as well as us having flattened the curve. And there are two main reasons why we're asking states and territories to look at achieving this. One is we don't want the learning divide to continue to grow in this nation. We know that for those students who don't have classroom contact, for low socioeconomic children, for Indigenous children, those where English is spoken as a second language at home, for rural and remote children, they're the ones who miss out and will see the education divide grow if they can't get that contact at the classroom level. And the second reason is we don't want parents having to choose between going to work or staying at home having to supervise their children while they pursue their education. So they're the main reasons, the two main reasons why we continue to prosecute the case that we really want to see all schools open and all year levels back at school by the end of May.
It is difficult for you as the Education Minister at a federal level because, as you point out, schools are run by the states, so there is limited power there. But taking an overall view, if students do get back to full classroom learning by the end of May, which is your strong wish that is coming through loud and clear, will we still need to see almost a two-tiered learning system? Or do you assume, can teachers assume, that once everyone's back in the classroom that the curriculum just goes on? Because the reality is some students will be behind, they haven't learned as well at home. So will there need to be an element of reteaching, if you like?
So this will be one of the challenges for principals and for teachers. And look, I empathise with our principals and teachers right across the nation. COVID-19 has presented many challenges for them. And I would say to parents, please make sure as children go back to school, as normality resumes in the classroom, support your principals, support your teachers, because we do want to make sure that our students can catch up on what they've missed. So there will be challenges. Obviously, we'll be looking when it comes to Year 12 students, what curriculum and assessment will look like for them this year. We know, and we've made it very clear, that there will be no Year 13, there will be no mass repeating, and they will get an ATAR for 2020, but we've now got to put in place the protocols that will govern what that ATAR will look like for all those Year 12 students, and we'll do that in early May when Education Council meets again. So many challenges for our schools, but the quicker we can get our students and our teachers back in the classroom and teaching, the quicker we'll be able to address these divides. The longer it goes on, the harder it's going to be.
Indeed. Let's talk about childcare now as well, because it is free for anyone sending their child to childcare at the moment. This has now been in place for a number of weeks. What is the feedback you've had from childcare centres? It's certainly not a perfect solution, but are there some unintended consequences that you now need to fix?
So we just have to remember why we took the measures that we did and why we put in place a completely new system to govern the childcare sector. The childcare sector was on the verge of collapse. Parents were taking their children out of childcare, and the sector faced mass closures, and it was going to mean, especially for parents who needed to be working, that they would be struggling to be able to find places to take their young children to get the care they needed while they were working. Now, the system has worked well on the whole, but it is calibrated with JobKeeper, and as we know, JobKeeper doesn't kick in till early May. So we've been working with the sector to make sure that that bridge until JobKeeper comes in can be met by the sector, and that's why we made 2 payments. We brought forward a payment, we had an arrears payment and the first payment in the first week to try and help them with their cash flow.
Okay.
There will always be some unintended consequences. There were some facilities which have had attendance rates at 100% and continue to see those rates at 100%. So obviously we need to work with them, and that's why we've set up special circumstances. But my plea to the sector is, remember, this is a Team Australia event. All of us have to work together and understand that all of us need to be making sacrifices to ensure we get through the 3 to 6 months of this pandemic. And as a whole, the sector has been doing that, but we need to continue to work with them to make sure that those centres where there are events which have happened or particular circumstances where we need to work with them to make sure through special circumstances we're dealing with their issues.
Okay, so you do acknowledge that some of the better performing centres perhaps have been penalised, not intentionally, but penalised through this temporary scheme. So is it your advice that they contact the department so you can work out some special circumstances there? And also, I just want to bring up JobKeeper. Do you acknowledge that many of the workers in childcare centres are actually visa holders, because it is an area where skilled workers need to be attracted to those centres, and therefore they're not eligible for JobKeeper?
Look, there are some centres who use visa holders who aren't eligible for JobKeeper, and that's one of the things we're going to be looking at when we do the 1 month review of this new approach that we've got in place. And we always said that we would do that 1 month review, and that will be starting next week. And that's one of the things we'll be looking at, is how we account for those centres who might use a large proportion of their staff aren't eligible for JobKeeper. So one of the things that we'll be looking at during the review. And for those centres who have seen their attendance rates at 100% or even increase further, we'll be looking at that during the review as well. So we always knew that this new system would put in place some examples that we would need to address. We've put in place a 1 month review that's about to get started, and we're going to look at all these issues, and we'll continue the dialogue and the very constructive dialogue that we've had with the sector about addressing some of these problems. Across the board, most providers are getting about 40 to 60% attendance rates. So there is still a lot of capacity left in the system, but hopefully as we continue to flatten the curve and as we see more restrictions lifted and more people going back to work, we'll see those attendance rates begin to lift again, and then we can look and see, okay, well, do we need to move back to the old system, remembering that that is ready to be turned on if we deem it necessary. But with capacity rates across the sector at the moment at between 40 to 60%, we don't think we're there yet.
OK, Dan Tehan, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Laura.